utilized. So I proposed a solution. We even got a great deal for it, $500 from the community fund. Michael let out a short, humorless laugh. You sold my driveway. Technically, we reassigned it, she corrected, as casual as if discussing a garden club event. Michael rubbed his temples, his jaw clenching. This wasn't just ridiculous, it was illegal, and she was standing there acting like she had done him a favor. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He wasn't just any homeowner, he was Judge Michael Carter. He turned back to his house, stepping over someone's discarded fast food bag, and walked inside. Instead of fuming in silence, he grabbed his laptop and got to work. The first thing he pulled up was his property deed. Clear as day, his driveway was part of his legally owned land. The HOA had no authority to sell or rezone it. Next, he scoured the HOA's rules and regulations. Nowhere did it say they could seize private property. In fact, several clauses made it clear that this action violated the rules. Michael was building his case fast. But he wasn't just going the legal route. No, that would be too slow. He needed something immediate. Something that would make Karen regret this move. The next day, he played the part of the defeated homeowner. He didn't argue or yell. Instead, he calmly watched as people continued to park in his driveway, even waving at them as if he had accepted his fate. What they didn't know was that Michael had made a few phone calls. The first was to the city zoning department, filing an official complaint. The second was to his lawyer friend, who was happy to assist. The third? To the local towing company. By the weekend, Michael had everything he needed. The HOA had committed fraud by selling a piece of land they didn't own. The zoning office was already reviewing the legality of their actions. Best of all, Michael had found a loophole in Karen's so-called reassignment contract. Since the HOA had declared it public parking illegally, every car parked there was trespassing. Saturday morning, Michael stood in his front yard sipping coffee as tow trucks roared to life. One by one, every car in his driveway was hooked up and hauled away. Chaos ensued as people ran outside in pajamas, screaming as their cars were lifted. A woman dropped her smoothie in shock. The teenager who had been lounging on his hood tripped over his own feet trying to stop the tow driver. Then, like a queen descending from her throne, Karen stormed out of her house, face red with rage. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked. Michael turned to her, calm as ever. "Oh, just enforcing the law, Karen." He took another sip of coffee. "Turns out you don't actually have the power to sell my driveway. Which means all these cars, trespassing. You can't do this," she screamed. "Oh, but I did," he replied, handing her a piece of paper. "Here's the official court order proving it." Karen's face twisted in horror as she scanned the document. Michael smiled. This was just the beginning. He had struck the first blow, but Karen and the HOA wouldn't go down without a fight. The next day, Michael received an official HOA violation notice, accusing him of unauthorized vehicle removal, with a $500 fine per car. He almost laughed. It was so absurd it was impressive. Karen was doubling down, thinking she could find him into submission. But Michael wasn't rushing to respond. He was letting the situation stew. Meanwhile, he was laying a trap that Karen wouldn't see coming until it was too late. The following evening, he attended the HOA board meeting. As he walked in, the room went silent. Board members exchanged nervous glances. Karen, seated at the head of the table, forced a tight-lipped smile. Well, Michael," she said, gesturing to an empty chair. "So glad you could join us. I assume you're here to discuss your recent behavior." Michael settled into the seat, calm as ever. "Oh, I'm here to discuss a lot of things, Karen." Karen's smile widened. "Wonderful, because we have some concerns. Your actions disrupted the community and resulted in the removal of vehicles that were legally parked." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Legally parked? You sure about that?" Karen scoffed. "Of course. The HOA voted on the matter, as you're well aware." He slid a thick file onto the table. The weight of it made the board members shift uncomfortably. "That's interesting, because according to city zoning laws, private property cannot be reclassified as communal space without the owner's consent. And according to the HOA's own rules, any such decision must be voted on by all members, not just the board." He paused, letting the words sink in, then delivered the final blow. "Oh, and since I never consented, and there was no community-wide vote, your decision is not only invalid, it's fraud." Karen's face paled, but she quickly recovered. "That's a very dramatic interpretation, Michael, but the fact remains that the community needed more parking, and the HOA acted in the best interest of everyone." Michael leaned forward slightly. "That's not how the law works, Karen. And unfortunately for you, I've already filed a formal complaint with the city's housing authority. They're very interested in how this HOA has been conducting its affairs." A murmur of concern spread across the board. One of the members, Robert, cleared his throat. Now hold on a minute, Judge Carter. Maybe we can find a compromise. Michael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I already found one, Robert. It's called justice. Karen gripped the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. She forced another smile, but a nervous twitch flickered in her eye. Michael, there's no need to get hostile. Let's just revisit the discussion and see if we can come to an agreement. Michael nodded slowly. I agree. Let's revisit it, preferably in a courtroom. That was when Karen lost it. She shot to her feet, slamming her palms onto the table. You're being ridiculous. You think you can just waltz in here and undo everything we've built? Michael stayed seated, calm as ever. Oh, I don't think I know. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Board members whispered to each other, some panicking, others furious. Karen was still fuming, her hands shaking. She had underestimated him, and now she was scrambling. But Michael wasn't done yet. The next morning, he escalated things further. He filed a formal lawsuit against the HOA for property theft, fraud, and mismanagement of funds, with the evidence he had gathered, including recorded conversations where Karen admitted to the shady sale of his driveway. The case was rock solid. Within days, city officials launched an investigation into the HOA's financial records. It turned out that Karen and a few select board members had been misusing HOA funds for years: lavish dinners, vacations disguised as HOA conferences, suspicious payments to contractors who didn't exist. Michael had just ripped the lid off a Pandora's box of corruption. By the end of the week, Karen was in full meltdown mode. She had gone from smug and confident to desperate and frantic. She tried everything, sending Michael passive-aggressive emails, calling emergency HOA meetings to fix the issue, even trying to convince some board members to throw him a fake apology in hopes he'd back off. But Michael didn't back off. Then came the final straw. One morning, Karen stormed up to his doorstep, looking disheveled, her usual composed demeanor completely shattered. Michael, she started, her voice strained. We need to talk. He sipped his coffee. Do we? She took a deep breath, forcing a smile. Look, this has gotten way out of hand. There's no need for lawsuits or city investigations. We can settle this like reasonable adults. Michael tilted his head. You mean like how you reasonably stole my driveway? She let out a harsh breath. Fine. We'll revert the decision. The driveway is yours again. Just drop the lawsuit. He let her words hang in the air for a moment before shaking his head. No, Karen. This isn't just about my driveway anymore. Panic flashed across her face. Michael, please. If this lawsuit goes through, He interrupted her, voice calm but firm. Lose your position. Face criminal charges. Be forced to pay back all the money you stole. Karen swallowed hard, her throat bobbing. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Michael finished his coffee and set the cup down with a satisfied sigh. Actions have consequences, Karen. You of all people should understand that. She opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing there was nothing left to say. Defeated, she turned and walked away. This time, she didn't storm off. She didn't threaten him. She didn't try to make some last-minute power move. She just left. Michael knew that was the last time she would ever come to him for help. The date was set, but it never made it that far. With overwhelming evidence against them, the HOA board crumbled. Members started turning on each other, trying to cut deals to save themselves. The homeowners, once terrified of the HOA, now had the upper hand. They demanded change, and change came fast. The HOA was completely restructured. Karen and her inner circle were permanently removed, banned from holding any positions of authority. The stolen funds were recovered, and massive refunds were issued to homeowners who had been wrongly charged over the years. And then there was Karen herself. The final blow came when the state opened an embezzlement case against her. The evidence of her misuse of HOA funds was undeniable. She was forced to sell her house to cover legal fees and damages, leaving the very community she had once ruled over. Michael didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. One evening, as he stood on his newly reclaimed driveway, watching the last of the moving trucks leave Karen's former house, his wife Sarah stepped beside him. It's finally over, she said, handing him a glass of wine. Michael took it with a smirk. Not just over. It's better. With the HOA reformed, the neighborhood was no longer a battlefield. People started smiling again, attending community events without fear of fines. The ridiculous rules Karen had enforced were tossed out. No more fines for the color of your front door. No more overpriced fees for basic maintenance. No more fear of an unchecked HOA president playing dictator. Michael wasn't interested in leading the HOA himself, but he made sure the new leadership cared about the community, not just their own power. One day, as he left for work, he noticed a familiar figure struggling to parallel park outside his house. It was Karen. Her new apartment didn't come with assigned parking, and she had to fight for a spot just like everyone else. She saw him watching and quickly looked away, pretending he didn't exist. Michael smiled to himself as he climbed into his car. Justice wasn't just about winning. It was about balance. And right now, balance had never felt so sweet.